In this video, we're going to explore God's love. There are ersatz of God's love out there, and then there's God's genuine love. One way that we tend to be tricked into accepting the ersatz as opposed to his true love is by receiving love that gives us what we want right now, as opposed to something that we need right now in the mid to long run and in the life to come. So let's look into this. Man's definition of many words, especially holy words, are not wholly right. They're not the whole truth, and sometimes they're not the truth at all. We need our minds to be renewed. And the way that we do that is by getting our semantics right. Semantics is, in basic terms, the defining of words. If we can't define words the same, then language is just, it's not as meaningful as it can be. So the way that you define terms, the way that God defines terms, instead of the way that man defines terms through conversation, dictionaries, and Strong's Concordances. Strong's Concordances are very powerful tools, but they're not 100% accurate defining terms the exact way that the Creator defines terms. The number one way that we do that is through a relationship with the true God. And one of the greatest tools that he's given us in cultivating that relationship properly is his word. There's this tool called the law of firsts, or the law of first appearances, and it goes a little something like this. In the Tanakh, the first time that a Hebrew word comes up, the context clues around that word are what define that word. Now, once you have that solid foundation, that first appearance, every other time the word comes up, it should build on that foundation squarely. If your definition of that word isn't squarely lining up with the first appearance, then it's an opportunity for you to change the way that your mind works so that you stand more squarely on the solid rock that is Yeshua, Messiah. So now that we understand that, let's move to this parallel concept here. We've got Yeshua on the cross. Yeshua on the cross is not the first appearance of God's love. However, in many people's lives, it is the first appearance of God's love because it's the most famous display of his love. The reason why this is the most famous display, John 3:16, is because it is what's absolutely necessary for a heathen to come into relationship with God. But it's not what's absolutely necessary for a maturing loved one of God who's already beyond the cross to mature in strength in that relationship. The reason for that is because after the cross, we become a new creation. The cross is not the starting line, the way, and the finish line. The cross is just the starting line. Yeshua is the way, the life, and the truth. He is the door. The cross is the door. But there is a life beyond that cross. It's called the resurrection, the newness of life. So, moving forward, what is the first appearance of God's love? And how can we change our mind from the thought process of the suffering heathen who is new to the Messiah, who's going through so much difficulty because their flesh needs to die, to come to a newness of life, where life is now the focus and not death? We look to Genesis in the very beginning. God creating Adam and Eve, that is a display of God's love. God creating Hava for Adam, that is a display of God's love. God making Adam out of clay and then telling him to work the ground in the garden, that's a display of God's love. God giving Adam dominion over the animals and giving him the work to do in naming the animals, that's a display of God's love. Those are all the foundational displays of God's love. Those are foundational displays of God's love when things are going right, when man isn't sinning. But by the admission of all of the people's mouths that I've ever spoken to, everyone believes that they are so hopeless in sinning that it's not even worth trying to not sin. So let's look at God's love when sin is involved. Because here we are on planet Earth, sin is rampant, and that's the kind of God's love that we receive. Even after the cross, we still sin. Some of us have the ability to mitigate a great deal, if not all, of that sin at some point in our lives. But nobody can look back at their whole life and say, I never sinned. Some people can look back at the last month, the last year, the last 10 years, the last 20 years, and say that they were blameless before God. We don't need an ersatz of God's love. We need his real love. It's not something that we just want. Actually, many people, they don't want God's love, and when it comes along, they say, no, I don't want that. And they live, unfortunately, in the ersatz of his love. God's true love is generally not what we want, but it is what we need right now and in the mid and long run and in the life to come. Look at what happened when the fall occurred. The next thing that happened is God cursed the people. That is his judgment. He cursed the snake, he cursed Adam, he cursed Hava, he cursed man, and he cursed woman. Now it says to study yourselves approved. And while watching this video is giving you righteous, loving mentorship in study, it isn't the study itself. You have to go open up your word and do this study between you and God. My friends, I'm not God, and a personal relationship with me is great and beneficial to you, as is with any other righteous person. And some heathen, for that matter. God uses heathen as well to benefit us and grow us. But none of that comes anywhere close to the relationship that you can have with God. Even though you can't see him, his relationship is so much more fulfilling than what I can provide you. So let's look at where we can find this image of God's true love. You look at what Adam and Hava did. Specifically, you go in there and you really pick through it. What did they do? And then you look at what God did in response. He asked them questions, listened to the way that they responded, and then used that to mete out judgment. Now look at his judgment and ask yourself, when I have behaved in sinful ways that are similar to this circumstance, and I went to God with that sin, or God came to me to call me out on that sin, what was the character of love that I experienced? Does it line up with this foundational character? My friend, if it doesn't, the unfortunate truth is you're living in an ersatz of God's love. God's there from time to time, but many times you are a victim of the great deceiver who will and is deceiving many. Now these questions, they're designed not to expose things to make you vulnerable and uncomfortable, although that's what they do. All these questions are doing are exposing things that are already there. It's not the question that's making you vulnerable and uncomfortable. there's something that should be making you feel vulnerable and uncomfortable all the time that's there, that has been covered up by the great deceiver. And this video was designed to show you something that needs to be addressed. And this is where I'm going to invite you to go spend some personal time with God and to study it out and to ask yourself that hard question and to make some changes in your life so that your life can change. Thank you for learning with us today at Gleaning the Scriptures. Don't forget to share this video with people. It will help you, it will help the channel, and it will help those who receive the benefits of paying attention to these hard facts. God's love is awesome. And the more that we can get rid of that sin through his love, the more that we can experience the love that he truly wants to give us. Less mercy, less judging us as being bad, and more, well done, good and faithful servant.